that South Floridians deserve, and we will continue to fight for it.
Now to the Middle East, where President Trump has stepped back from threats of a major escalation in the fighting with Iran after nearly 2 weeks of bombing. This comes amid reports that stockpiles of crucial U.S. weapons are running low. Charlie D'Agata is in Jordan. Charlie, good morning.
Good morning to you, Adriana. On Friday night, there was every indication that the U.S. was preparing for a major attack, maybe even a return to full combat. Then President Trump met with military advisors. Plan appears to be put on hold, apparently over concerns whether the military has enough firepower to withstand the consequences. After 2 straight weeks of nightly and escalating bombing campaigns by the U.S. military and Iran's unrelenting retaliation, both sides came to an abrupt halt. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz explained why to Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan.
It's giving diplomacy some space. It's giving diplomacy a little bit of time. Of course, the president tried diplomacy last year. He's tried it this year. He is a president of peace. He is giving diplomacy a chance. We'll see over the next coming days.
Sources in Iran and Oman tell CBS News there is progress to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But the U.S. military has continued to pour more hardware into the region, including the addition of the B-1 bombers, capable of carrying the fleet's biggest bombs and lots of them. The U.S. blockade is also still firmly in place. Central Command releasing video showing U.S. forces boarding one vessel and disabling another. But CBS News has learned that after nearly 5 months of fighting, the U.S. military is burning through munition stockpiles faster than they can be replenished, especially the interceptors needed to take down Iranian missiles and drones, which may have forced the administration to think twice about launching the massive attack President Trump threatened just last week. Pushback from Ambassador Waltz.
But I also want to address this nonsense that somehow we don't have the assets that we need. Not only do we...
And Germentum says they're asking God to replenish their rapidly diminishing stockpile of interceptors. Maybe it'll work. The problem is God might be Shia, given the way that this conflict has unfolded, you know.
I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you.
Maybe they should start doing the Ya Ali chants instead, which is way more aura, in my opinion, so that they could actually have God replenish their diminishing interceptor stockpiles, potentially. Now, I'm of 2 different minds on this, because here's the thing. I'm of 2 different minds on this, because on the one hand, I do believe that America has a finite supply, and the procurement is approximately around like 90 Tomahawks a year, even with the increased productive capabilities with the Defense Production Act, which Donald Trump called. And on the interceptor side, the numbers are even lower. You can make like PAC-3 missiles. They're deploying PAC-2 missiles as well. They went back and put in orders for PAC-2 missiles now, which are obviously less capable than the PAC-3 missiles. We've already seen some of the PAC-3 missiles also fail at interceptions in Bahrain a couple days ago. A Patriot missile actually ended up falling and exploding on a residential neighborhood in Bahrain. We don't know what the results of that look like. We don't know what the casualty numbers are, because countries in the Gulf are very protective. They don't have free speech. They will arrest you. A friend of mine was literally arrested in Kuwait for reposting someone else's video of an impact in Kuwait. So we don't know what the actual damage looks like. We can only make an assessment. However, what we can do is take a look at the American American demands from Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and all these other defense contractors, and it's clear that they are relying on PAC-2s because PAC-3s they've stopped the shipment of, they've deferred. So here's the thing. Patriot PAC-3 missiles are costly. They're very expensive. Okay. PAC-2 obviously has less capabilities. They've improved the capabilities of the PAC-2 missiles. They've upgraded them. However, these are very costly missiles. These are the interceptor missiles that they're using, right? The way it goes is America launches standoff munitions like Tomahawk missiles from afar because they can't drop unguided gravity bombs over the Iranian airspace because they don't have full-blown air superiority. So they use their standoff munitions, and they've wasted their standoff munitions against Iranian targets, sometimes military targets, oftentimes now civilian targets as well, like bridges, desalination plants, power plants, even sometimes refineries. And Iran, in retaliation to that, turns around and attacks the Gulf nations in a similar manner. Sometimes they're attacking the military installations in the Gulf, radar installations, early advanced warning systems. Sometimes they hit U.S. bases. Like in the early stages of Operation Epic Fury, the Iranian targets were the drone targets were sometimes the active duty service members. But oftentimes they were just trying to blow up radar installations, make this as costly as possible, or shut off the American eyes and ears in the region to make it more difficult for them to even defend Israel. Right? So they did that successfully. And this time around, post-MOU, they're also increasing the collateral damage. And they're actually targeting military hangars where active duty service members are laying in, sleeping in. And they've actually killed a bunch of soldiers, right? This presents a unique problem for Donald Trump because you can, hide the shame of losing $1 billion radar system. But when American soldiers are coming back in flag-draped coffins, well, then that sets up a unique PR problem, a unique PR crisis for every American government, including the Trump administration, right? So while America is running out of interceptor missiles, they are now relying on older missiles, which have less success in interception. 18 troops have been killed so far. 624 troops have been wounded since the U.S. launched its war against Iran on the 28th of February. These numbers are not good. Okay? They're devastating. This is a devastating number for the most superior military on the planet, especially against a middle power like Iran that's now becoming a regional power. And these are the numbers that they have reported. So if you add on contractors, which the military doesn't have any obligation to officially report on, the numbers of casualties are probably far higher. Okay? This is the lowest. Just understand that the numbers that CENTCOM openly admits to are always going to be the lowest numbers possible. Okay? So there's a real issue here. There's a real issue. There already was a real issue because Iran is fighting back. Iran is fighting back by striking American military bases, American assets in the region, American soldiers, and killing American soldiers. The casualty numbers are increasing. This is a real problem. And we know it's a real problem because it was destined to be a real problem before we launched this military operation. If you recall, I covered it at the time. The generals and the intelligence community made their assessments. They told Donald Trump that, one, killing the leadership in Iran was not going to implement a regime change, that there was no aerial bombardment campaign that would be successful in implementing a regime change. And two, if we were to engage in this battle at the behest of Israel, we would destroy our standoff munition stockpiles that we have developed for and that we've procured for our peer and near peer adversaries, Russia and China. And then on top of that, we would run out of interceptors that we use to defend Israel and interceptors that we use to defend our allies in the region. And not only just our allies in the region, but also interceptors that we use to defend our assets in the region. Okay? And that's where we're at now. This is not a new issue. This is something that I talked about at the beginning of Operation Epstein Fury, if you recall, because when Trump clearly didn't listen to his own generals, General Dan Cain, also known as Raising Cain, very clearly went to the media and leaked to the media that these would be imminent problems if we actually launch this military quagmire. Okay? It's very clear. It was Trump's own general that warned about this problem. Sina Tusi from CI Policy says the munitions issue isn't new. It was already evident during last summer's war, particularly with THAAD and Arrow interceptors being depleted. These leaks to Axios and other outlets, just as Trump backs off again, feel more like a convenient explanation than the real reason. This round of fighting was arguably even less effective than the last. U.S. air superiority appeared more constrained. Iran was moving launchers more freely and launching missiles even in broad daylight. It doesn't seem many of its launchers were even hit this time. And it continued operations even in Sharik, right next to the Strait of Hormuz, despite repeated U.S. strikes. The fundamental problem remains the same. Trump still has no viable military path to achieve his incoherent objectives. So what were the objectives? The three top objectives have always been what Israel wants America to do. Number one was obviously regime change and creating a failed state in Iran. You only achieve that by fomenting instability on the ground, beefing up sectarian conflict. Iran's a very diverse country, destroying the Basij military outposts, destroying the police precincts all around the country, and hoping that the people rise up. First, you foment instability through economic warfare, through the sanctions, which America has been doing for decades at this point. People get pissed off. People get frustrated. They start protesting against the government. First, it was the Bazaris that protested against the government, which is the base of support for the IRGC, for the Islamic Republic. And then that protest explodes into a youth movement, into, it takes on a ethnic shape as well in the Kurdish areas, okay, in the areas near Balochistan. But it didn't actually work in that way. It didn't work in the way that the Americans and the Israelis predicted. The IRGC was unbelievably forceful in their retaliation. They were incredibly ruthless in their retaliation. Bazaris are the base of support. I mean, part of it, yeah. It's not, what do you mean? Small business owners? Would you not say that they are somewhat inside of the Shia base? They are. In any case, here's the thing. It failed. Partially it failed because the Iranian response was incredibly violent and incredibly forceful, and they were able to destroy this protest movement. Part of the reason why they were able to destroy it was because they were able to point to the Americans and the Israelis openly stating that they were heavily involved in these protests. Trump came out months after the fact and even said we were trying to arm the Kurds so we could start a revolution in the country, all this stuff. And I do believe that part of it was obviously organic, part of it was real instability in the country, and part of it was born out of the economic instability, the economic volatility. And part of it was the forceful response that they wanted to create, the Americans and the Israelis wanted to create and bring about, so that people would be even more frustrated. People would be even more frustrated with the violence that they experience when your, family members die as they're out in the streets protesting. You're more likely to take up arms against the government. But what failed in the aftermath was the decapitation strike. Okay? When America came in alongside the Israeli Air Force and engaged in this ruthless first-day bombing campaign amidst negotiations through an act of perfidy once again, what ended up happening, and they blew up the Minab school as well, and they killed a bunch of little girls going to school, 120 of them, okay? That, alongside the martyrdom of the leadership structure, gave credence to the hardliners, the IRGC, the replacements, okay? They started getting to work with their mosaic structure, the decentralized defense structure that they had implemented as a contingency plan for what was the inevitable assassination of the entirety of the leadership of the IRGC and also the Islamic Republic, including Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Iranians, of course, even those who were iffy or were critical over the administration, recognized very quickly that the Americans and the Israelis were not there to help them. Okay? They were not there to liberate them, as it was presented by way of Saudi-backed media, by way of BBC Persia, by way of Western media that had certainly played a formative role in establishing a base of resistance against the Islamic Republic. But they realized very quickly that America had no investment in this. One of the key factors was the Minab school bombing. The other one was hitting the refineries in Tehran. When the black cloud was delivering ash rain upon the entire Iranian population in these like major areas with a lot of population density, a lot of the people, a lot of the young professionals, a lot of the college students very quickly realized that this was only bringing about biological and ecological disaster. It was not liberation at all. You blow up Iranian cultural sites, you poison the water, you blow up the refineries, and all of a sudden the people that would have made up the base of resistance that you need, because you can never do regime change without some kind of popular mobilization on the ground. Even in Libya, you had popular mobilization on the ground, right? The Americans and the Israelis lost their popular base that they could have utilized against the Islamic Republic. This was another major failure. And ever since then, this consistent tit-for-tat escalation ladder that America and Iran has been engaging in has been a disaster, because Iran turned around and closed the Strait of Hormuz with relative ease. You cannot out-organize topography and geography, okay? Iran is mountainous. It's like a fortress. And a lot of the munitions facilities, a lot of the missile silos are deep underground. A lot of the production is deep underground. A lot of the missile launchers are also inside of cave systems. So all you can do is basically shut off the entrance points into these caves, but they have bulldozers waiting on the other side of those cave systems that will quickly dig themselves out. So America was not even capable of attriting the Iranian strikes. The Iranian temporary launchers, which are oftentimes just civilian trucks like K trucks, pickup trucks, and for their larger medium range ballistics, they have these bigger trucks that they, again, move out of the mountainside, move out of their tunnel systems when they want to strike. They wait it out to see if a Reaper drone will laser it. And if they don't, they get back in the truck and they pull it back into those caverns. Okay? So this has been a spectacular failure because Iran has not only gained more leverage in the process, unambiguously gained more leverage in the process, this economic nuclear weapon closing off the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran has also been able to successfully destroy many American installations in the region and made it very costly for Americans to continue waging this war and not really giving up, not really falling apart. The regime is intact. They're probably more aggressive than they were before, or at least like the moderates and the reformists and people who have wanted to negotiate with the West have looked silly in the process. Because even in the negotiations process, the only way that they've been able to achieve some sort of negotiation, the Iranians, I mean, they've only been able to achieve because of the military, because of the IRGC's successive strikes. And for all intents and purposes, they've been working in tandem with one another. There isn't a lot of chaos. America tries to make it seem like there's a lot of chaos. America tries to make it seem like there's a lot of discontent amongst the reformists and the hardliners, but there isn't. They're working in unison with one another. For all intents and purposes, from our side, they're working with direct correspondence. Okay? Because for Iran, they understand that this is an existential threat. For America and Israel, it's just an enemy that must be vanquished, right? So that Israel can continue its Greater Israel project unimpeded without a major sovereign power in the region that has the striking capability. So this goes back to the goals, right? So the number one goal was regime change and perhaps turning Iran into a failed state, not dissimilar to Libya. The second goal for the American and the Israeli side were to destroy the missile launching capabilities. Okay? The Iranian strike capabilities, the Iranian missile silos, the Iranian industrial base that exists in deep underground facilities, they wanted to destroy it all. And that was also unsuccessful, as evidenced by the fact that Iran's striking capabilities have not been attrited at all, have not deteriorated at all. And as a matter of fact, they've only improved their capabilities in the process because they successfully destroyed American defenses. So that was the second problem. Okay? There was no way to do this with the current American military capabilities, the current Israeli military capabilities. Part of that is because the Iranian side has unique defenses, anti-air defense systems, and they've been able to successfully make it very costly to fly over the Iranian airspace to find to find strike sites that they can bomb and bomb successfully. The third point has always been the most bullshit point. And it's the one that you hear the most. The Iranian nuclear program. Now, the reason why I say it's the most bullshit point is because the Iranian nuclear program was never to develop nuclear weapons. It was simply to gain leverage over the American negotiations so that you can bring the Americans back to the negotiation table and demand complete sanctions relief. Okay? If we're looking at three major points, number one was regime change and potentially creating a failed state in Iran, destroying the Islamic Republic, and feeding into that sectarian conflict that would be inevitable in that process. Second goal was to successfully destroy the Iranian strike capabilities so that they can no longer hit Israel, okay? And maybe even the Gulf states as well in the region, which is even more difficult, okay? And the last goal, like I said, was the Iranian nuclear program. That one is the most bullshit one because Iran, time and time again, has openly mentioned that they are perfectly willing and perfectly capable to play ball with the Americans, with the Western world, not just with the Western world, but even with the multilateral agreement that was put together, the JCPOA, which was Obama's signature achievement, which of course the Israelis fucking hated, right? They signed all the agreements. They followed through on all the agreements. Donald Trump came into power and immediately ripped apart the JCPOA at the behest of Israel. The Iranians have always played ball. As a matter of fact, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the former supreme leader of Iran, had issued a fatwa many years prior to the nuclear grade enrichment of uranium, a fatwa against nuclear arms. This kind of stuff comes across as silly to us in the West, but it clearly matters. It clearly matters to the Iranians. Now, we killed the guy who issued the fatwa, okay? And I don't know if the new Iranian leadership is as unwilling to develop nuclear arms. I don't know. But what I will say is this. Regardless of whether or not the Iranian leadership now wants to develop nuclear weapons or not, is also irrelevant. What is a fatwa? A fatwa is like an edict. For those of you who don't know, it's when someone it's like when the Pope issues a statement. It becomes religious law. Okay, a decree. So it's a significant declaration. It's important. It's a religious ruling for all of the followers of the faith. So, in any case, so we established that the third option, the nuclear, or the third goal for the Israeli side and the American side was also always bullshit. The reason why it was bullshit is because there's no military solution to the enrichment of uranium inside of Iran. There's no solution that is a military solution beyond boots on the ground, permanent military occupation of Iran, which will be unbelievably costly and impossible, which will destroy the United States of America regardless. Okay, that's a whole different story that I'm not even going to get into. Iran is a nation with 93 million people in it. Iran has developed for the last 47 years their defenses against some kind of military occupation by the United States of America. This is what the Iranian Revolution was about, right? They care about sovereignty above all else. And we're seeing the results of that. But ultimately, the only solution, if you care about the nuclear program, the only solution is diplomacy. Diplomacy succeeded with Barack Obama. But the reason why the Israelis keep using the nuclear program, and the reason why Trump keeps leaning into the nuclear program, is because you can see it as a poison pill, right? You can, if you have a much more hopeful perspective on it, on whether there is some sort of peaceable solution to all of this, then it's the one that the Iranians are probably most likely to agree to because they've agreed to it in the past. Okay, but they'll extract a lot of concessions to agree to the non-nuclear proliferation agreement. Okay? But Americans are, if you want to look at it in a cynical framework, the Americans and the Israelis are using that as a poison pill provision to be like, oh, there's still more nukes. There's still, stop looking at the script so much. There is no script. I'm looking at chat. I do like that my commentary has gotten a lot sharper, though, because people are now saying that I'm looking at a script. That means the commentary is solid. But as I was saying, as I was saying, I forgot what I was saying. God damn it. Oh, if the Americans are actually invested in denuclearizing Iran, or at least making sure that Iran keeps up with only civilian-grade enriched uranium, okay? You know, you need enriched uranium for certain things, you know, radiology, whatnot, right? But if you want to do that, if we want to do that for Iran, we have to give concessions to Iran. America doesn't want to do that. And because America doesn't want to do that, it finds itself further and further deeply embedded in this conflict, in this military quagmire. Because America thinks still that there is some kind of military solution. There is no military solution. And the more we lean into the military solution that is impossible at this point, the more leverage Iran gains. And we saw this. We saw this pre-MOU, and we're seeing this post-MOU as well. Pre-MOU, we went to the negotiations process because we needed respite. We needed some kind of respite because the strategic petroleum reserves were getting to critical levels, as I've talked about over and over again. You have 300 million barrels. If it reaches below 300 million barrels, if we reach 150 million barrels in the salt caverns, they collapse because there's not enough pressure. Okay? So every day that goes on where the strait is still closed and America has to tap into their strategic petroleum reserves is another day where we are nearing the critical levels. Okay? So the only thing the United States of America can do at this point is basically tuck tail and run. And then turn around and say, we are sorry, Iran, you are controlling the Strait of Hormuz. We will come together and abide by some kind of international standard. Maybe it'll resemble the Bosphorus deal that Turkey has, right? Because for those of you who don't know, Turkey controls the Bosphorus. It's the entry point into the Black Sea. And ships, like military ships, warships, have a limited time that they are allowed inside of the Black Sea, and they always have to be carried around by a Turkish ship. Like, there's a lot of limitations, and also there's a payment that you give the Turkish government in order to go through the Bosphorus into the Black Sea or out of the Black Sea. So I suspect, they have to be escorted. I suspect that the Omani-Iranian agreement will resemble something similar to that. That is the best case scenario, where everyone gets to transit the Strait of Hormuz, but you pay some kind of, not toll, you don't want to call it a toll, obviously that's problematic, but you pay some environmental fee, right? A fee to maintain stability, a fee to manage the Strait of Hormuz, a service fee, a shipping and handling fee, whatever you want to call it. Okay? Iran has already said that they would call it an environmental remittance fee. It's basically still a de facto toll. Iran's not going to give that up because Iran has now found this leverage. Why would they give it up? Of course they're not going to give it up. Not paying the terrorists, bomb them to hell. Well, your idiocy, unfortunately, is how we got to this problem to begin with. That's why we're in this current problem, right? Bomb them to hell, no fee to terrorists. I mean, we are the literal terrorists in this conversation. This is another sovereign nation that we are waging battle with, and that's just not how it goes. Okay, with what? With what weapons? Right? We've been doing that for almost, 4 months now, 5 months now. We've been doing that exact thing, and the strait is still closed. So at some point, you have to try something different, especially if the problem, the global crisis on the energy markets is getting to a place where, it's going to become unmanageable. There are obviously compounding issues that will take shape once we start reaching critical levels in our strategic petroleum reserves. We will have to cut our exports to Europe and other markets that we're sending oil to right now. This is a global commodity for a reason. It's one that has basically inelastic demand, because without oil, then you have no energy grid in many countries. Without, you will have to significantly cut down on the demand artificially by restricting workflows, by restricting your industrial output. There's already a restriction on agricultural output to begin with, because fertilizer is a necessary resource that also comes out of the strait, right? You have no diesel, so you have no trucks. The rest of the world slowly but surely turns into what we see in Cuba, okay? That's the problem. That's the issue. The idea that we just, don't pay the terrorists and keep bombing is exactly the same idiotic mentality that has gotten us into this problem. So yeah. Joe Kent, former director of the National Counterterrorism Center, says, if non-proliferation was our goal, we foolishly sabotaged ourselves and our efforts to reach it. By killing the Ayatollah and attacking Iran, we showed that their strategy, not developing a nuclear weapon and retaining the ability to enrich uranium, was not enough to deter U.S. aggression. Now swap Iran for North Korea. We have proven to the world that the only thing that will prevent a U.S. attack is a nuclear weapon. Here's the thing. Every country knows this already. And it was already an L for Iran not to develop nuclear weapons immediately. Every country, by the way, that has developed a nuclear weapon, with the exception of, I guess, Pakistan, has started off with a civilian nuclear program, North Korea included. That's what the DPRK initially said they were doing. Oh, we just have a civilian nuclear facility. It's just for civilian use. And then, of course, they develop, they enrich uranium for nuclear proliferation, for nuclear arms. And then they also develop intercontinental ballistic missiles. And for the record, it was the appropriate strategy. If you want to maintain sovereignty, if you want to be a country that is intact, that's what you have to do. Okay? Pakistan is another example of this as well. So if you want to maintain sovereignty in a nuclear world, you have to engage in nuclear proliferation. And it was a major mistake for Iran not to develop nukes when they could have. Okay? That's why North Korea is, not bombed with regular frequency, whereas Iran is bombed all the time. That's it. So North Korea, DPRK, they went up the steps. First, their deterrence was their artillery program directed at Seoul, right? That was a significant enough deterrent to not go back and wage war with the DPRK. Then it was their nuclear proliferation. Then it was their intercontinental ballistic missiles program, their delivery systems that they have for their nukes. Okay? And now they remain unbombed. Nuclear weapons is not enough as a deterrence? Yes, it's not. But it's a significant one to stop a foreign adversary like the United States of America from attacking you. Ahwaz is 1,000 kilometers away from the strait. The only reason the U.S. is hitting Ahwaz is that its ATACMS artillery in Kuwait can reach it from there. Yeah. This also creates a sufficient response or a necessary response by the Iranian side that is now entertaining boots on the ground military occupation of Kuwait, for the record, as a counterstrike. But yeah, the idea of like nuclear proliferation, we've pushed Iran into potentially developing nuclear arms at this point. I don't know if they will follow through on it, but as Mersheimer has said time and time again, the region would be far more stable if Iran had nuclear weapons from the jump. I happen to agree with Mersheimer's analysis on this. And Iran with nuclear weapons is a formidable opponent that you can't simply blow up. Israel can't blow it up. America can't blow it up. There's a reason why two nuclear-armed nations have not gone to war with one another, have not engaged in direct conflict with one another. At that point, it's just proxies. All you can do is deploy proxies. So we shall see. I guess the only example is India, Pakistan. Yeah. Which, luckily, Donald Trump saved the world. Donald Trump saved the world with India and Pakistan. They were fighting against one another, and Donald Trump came in and said, no more. The war has moderated Iran. By far, the most religious extremist opinion that Khamenei held was that developing nuclear weapons was a sin, regardless of the material impacts of this decision. Yeah, Iran's new leader is more open to pursuing a nuclear weapon, U.S. intelligence says. Yeah, no shit. I know that the New York Times and U.S. intelligence report is a classic misinfo combo, but I feel like this was pretty obvious to any regular observer. This is an inescapable fear that has stricken the U.S. and Israeli leadership and will continue to push Iran towards making it. So it's ironic from the American and Israeli side that they had three major military goals here, and they achieved none of them. And as a matter of fact, they've only given Iran more leverage. So why do we keep bombing? Well, part of the reason why we keep bombing is because we can't take a fucking L. Okay? We cannot take an L. Because if America takes an L here, it's over. America comes to the recognition that it has lost this war. It has lost this battle. But the reality is, America has already lost this battle. So coming to that recognition and dealing with Iran as a sovereign nation and releasing the sanctions on Iran, no matter how much people yell at Trump domestically, is still the appropriate thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. And it's also the best strategic option. If you wage war with a sovereign nation and they gain leverage, they maintain or develop and then maintain their primacy over the Strait of Hormuz. This incredibly important strait for not only commerce, but for the entire globe's energy markets. Then you have to eat that L. Because every single day that goes on where America continues this tit-for-tat bombing campaigns, where America blows up an Iranian installation and then Iran turns around and retaliates by blowing up Gulf targets. Now the Ansar Allah movement has joined the battle as well. They're shutting down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. They're blowing up the Yanbu port that Saudi Arabia needs to utilize. They've blown up an Aramco facility, a Saudi Aramco facility that is engaging in oil refinery, in oil refinement. When that takes place, when that starts happening, you now are deteriorating or diminishing the readily available oil production permanently. Maybe not permanently, but at least for a decade or so. So every day that goes on, the world is falling deeper and deeper into this crisis. Here it is. Yeah, the Jazan refinery is on fire. This is according to the NASA satellites. There's also on the ground photography as well, on the ground photos as well. And this means that the fire is spreading. About 40 hours ago, this is what the fire looked like. Now it looks like this. This is from yesterday. There's also another